With their assets and base of capital equipment, they could easily undercut our prices. What we couldn't see back then was the internet, which would entirely obviate the need for us to own a network. It had to be in one of these early discussions with Denny that I was introduced to the cloud, a graphic much loved and used on IBM charts showing how networks were going to change computing, communications, and all manner of business and human interaction. The cloud would be shown in the middle. To one side there would be little icons representing people using PCs, cell phones, and other kinds of network-connected devices. On the other side of the cloud were businesses, governments, universities, and institutions also connected to the network. The idea was that the cloud, the network, would enable and support incredible amounts of communications and transactions among people and businesses and institutions. If the strategists were right and the cloud really did become the locus of all this interaction, it would cause two revolutions, one in computing and one in business. It would change computing because it would shift the workloads from PCs and other so-called client devices to larger enterprise systems inside companies and to the cloud, the network itself. This would reverse the trend that had made the PC the center of innovation and investment, with all the obvious implications for IT companies that had made their fortunes on PC technologies. Far more important, the massive, global connectivity that the cloud depicted would create a revolution in the interactions among millions of businesses, schools, governments, and consumers. It would change commerce, education, healthcare, government services, and on and on. It would cause the biggest wave of business transformation since the introduction of digital data processing in the 1960s. So it was natural that when I decided to put someone in charge of a team that would investigate whether we truly believed that convergence was the future, and if so, what to do about it, Denny got the call. He was passionate on the subject, by then he owned our network, and yet I knew Denny would make sure the team was objective. The team delivered its answer and a set of detailed recommendations in 3 months. A network computing blueprint. Denny's group believed zealously, from the standpoints of technical feasibility and the business opportunity, that this was where the industry was headed. But again, what they presented was not primarily an internet strategy. That's not surprising because this was back in the days when few people outside of universities and government labs had heard of the internet. Fewer still believed that the internet could be a mass-market communications medium, much less a platform for mainstream business transactions. One notable exception inside IBM was a marketing executive named John Patrick, who had a unique ability to bring the networked world out of the jargon of technology and into the minds of everyday people. John became our spokesperson, demonstrating to our customers and to IBM employees how real-life activities would benefit from the net, whether we were thinking of networks in general or the internet. Specifically, the single most important outcome of Denny's task force was a recommendation to commit the resources of the entire company to lead this next wave of computing, to mobilize on every front. On its face, and given the success we'd enjoyed based on proprietary architectures like the System/360, this could have presented a staggering barrier to success. But in truth, this one wasn't as tough for us as it would be for some of our mainstream competitors, because we'd long since made our commitment to open, standards-based computing, including embracing all the important internet standards and protocols. Still, there was plenty to do, much of it described previously. In software, we were fortunate to recognize that middleware would be the integrating glue of networked applications. We had to step up the internet enablement of these products and develop some new ones. We'd have to build a significant new services business around what came to be known as web hosting. And because the networked world was about helping customers transform their businesses, we had to build capability in consulting and implementation services associated with e-business. In component technology, what began in the early 1990s as a search for a new revenue stream turned into the foundry of specialized chips that would be in high demand. We also had to fill a lot of gaps In the summer of 1996, IBM and Lotus announced the Domino web server, the first major adaptation of Note's capability for the networked world. We needed an industrial-strength commerce server. After at least one false start, we created what is today known as WebSphere. Finally, getting the entire company on board and moving together would be critical. If I asked one unit, such as global services or software, to take the lead, there would be inevitable resistance from the other units. So we decided to form a new group with a pan-IBM mission, headed by an extraordinary executive named Irving Ladowskiberger. His job was to evangelize our network strategy across all of IBM's business units and to get them to change their R&D and marketing plans to embrace the net. In what represented at least a minor leap of faith, we called Irving's group the Internet Division. Irving was the ideal executive to take on this task. He had come up through the technical side of IBM, through the IBM Research Division and the high-end computing businesses. So he had rock-solid technical credentials. But he also had the ability, in his endearing Cuban accent, to translate very complex technologies into understandable ideas that got people excited. This was important not only because many people in the business units did not fully understand our strategy, but also because Irving would be very effective in influencing people who did not report to him. I won't minimize the challenges we faced in reorienting the portfolio around the net. I can say without hesitation, however, that a far bigger and harder piece of work would center on shaping the debate with customers and the industry on where the networked world was headed. Shaping the conversation. The first time I made public mention about any of this was to a group of Wall Street analysts in March 1994, several months after my infamous Gavision remark. This time, however, what I said went pretty much unnoticed. I articulated a strategic vision for IBM constructed around 6 imperatives. One of those imperatives was a commitment to lead in what I called the emerging and network-centric world. It was an admittedly clunky piece of terminology, and I can assure you that the next day's news reports were not ringing with anything resembling IBM's bold foray into the uncharted world of networked computing. So be it. By the fall of 1995, my confidence in our strategy had increased to the point where I decided to make network-centric computing the centerpiece of IBM's strategic vision. In October 1995, Businessweek published a cover story headlined, "Gerstner's Growth Plan. Yes, the CEO does have a vision. It's called Network-Centric Computing." 2 weeks later, on November 13, 1995, I gave my first major, inside the industry keynote speech at the huge Comdex trade show in Las Vegas. At the time, Comdex was the world's largest PC love fest, and a big part of my message was that something called network-centric computing was about to end the PC's reign at the center of the computing universe. I assume that all of you have at least one PC, I said. Most of you probably have several. Unless you're quietly tapping on your notebook while I'm over here talking, all of those PCs are sitting idle in your briefcase, back in your hotel room, office, in your car, or your home. Think about all that latent computing power that's wasted, totally unused. But in a truly networked world, we can share computational power, combine it, and leverage it. So this world will reshape our notions of computing and, in particular, our notions of the personal computer. For 15 years, the PC has been a wonderful device for individuals. But, ironically, the personal computer has not been well suited for that most personal aspect of what people do. We communicate. We work together. We interact. Things started happening fast. Netscape had made its headline-grabbing IPO. Microsoft had its epiphany and announced it was committing itself to the net. There was a buzz building. On the one hand, this was good for IBM because more voices were now extolling the virtues of a networked world. On the other hand, as more voices joined the conversation and more of our competitors jumped on the networked world bandwagon, the debates and arguments quickly overshadowed the real import and promise of the net. Microsoft and Netscape waged a titanic battle over browsers. The telcos and new kinds of service providers were racing to connect people and businesses to the net. Many companies, both inside and outside the IT industry, scrambled to own, leverage, and acquire a content, news, entertainment, weather, music, thinking that the connected millions would pay to access all of this online digital information. None of this was good for IBM. Although we wanted to be seen as a leader of this new era, we didn't have a browser. We were already planning to sell the global network and exit the business of providing internet connectivity. We said vocally and proudly that, unlike some of our competitors who were rushing headlong to launch their own online magazines and commerce sites, we were not going to compete with our customers. We weren't going to become a digital entertainment or media company, and we weren't going to get into online banking or stock trading. Simply put, we had a very different view of what was really happening about what the net would mean for business and societal relationships. Terms like information superhighway and e-commerce were insufficient to describe what we were talking about. We needed a vocabulary to help the industry, our customers, and even IBM employees understand that what we saw transcended access to digital information and online commerce. It would reshape every important kind of relationship and interaction among businesses and people. Eventually, our marketing and internet teams came forward with the term e-business.